in as attendees.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all fantastic. Just while we're waiting for other people to join, please use the chat window in Zoom to ask any questions. Perhaps the first one to get you started. What slows your research down the most? Time, budget, recruitment, or analysis? Please share your answers in the Zoom chat and I will summarize them before we have our open discussion at the end of the webinar. So without further ado, my name is James Breeze, psychologist and CEO of Research Network. We help businesses and government and universities to understand customers, staff, students, citizens, and business people across APAC. Today, I'd like to introduce our speakers. And first of all, I have to send apologies for Alfred, the CEO of Listen Labs. He's otherwise occupied and unfortunately can't make it. So in his place, we have Kit Wiggins. Kit was the first business hire at Listen Labs, a Wharton graduate who joined the team of four brilliant engineers with a big vision and no roadmap of how to take it to the world. While these coders were busy building the brain of the system, Kit was the one there translating it into raw innovation and real world relevance. Since then, Listen Labs has gone on to secure major funding, working with some of the biggest multinationals in the world. And Kit's role has stayed the same: bridge the brilliance of the technology with complex human world as it is designed to serve. He knows the system inside out, not just how it works, but why it matters. And today you're going to hear exactly why he's one of the most trusted voices shaping how AI meets real-world qualitative insight. Kit, welcome. And joining Kit in the conversation is someone whose work has transformed how we understand human behavior, Professor Gemma Calvert. Gemma is a pioneering neuroscientist and currently a professor for the last 10 or 11 years at Nanyang Technological University, NTU, here in Singapore. She holds a PhD in neuroscience from Oxford University and was the first scientist to use functional MRI to study how the brain responds to marketing, research that helped shape the global field of neuromarketing. She spent over 2 decades at the intersection of neuroscience, behavioral science, and commercial strategy, advising Fortune 500 companies, governments, and major brands in Asia and beyond. Gemma was also the first academic to run a full-scale study using Listen Labs, the AI-led interview platform we'll be showing you today. It produced deep insights, everything from Gen Z's relationship with social media to why young Singaporeans are rethinking parenthood. Gemma and I have collaborated closely on multiple studies, and what sets Gemma apart is her ability to turn complex science into meaningful human insight, the kind that shifts both thinking and systems. Gemma, we're thrilled to have you on board today.
Thanks, James, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So for our agenda today, we'll be understanding the research revolution and why traditional methods fall short these days and how that's possible and what's now possible. Kit will introduce some Listen Labs as a concept and demonstrate the platform and show us insights into how to use the system and how it technically works, because I know some of you have those questions, and also how the security works. Then we'll have a fireside chat between Gemma and Kit, and I'll facilitate that. Following up, you can ask your own questions through the chat, and we'll summarize any that you put in during the conversations, and then we'll give you an exciting offer. So, the research revolution, that's why we're here, to show you what happens when AI stops being a buzzword and becomes something that is a tool for radical clarity, not just faster data, but better understanding. Listen Labs is more than just a platform. It's a transformation of how we listen to people and how we uncover beliefs, not just behavior. It's the kind of qual that doesn't just inform decisions, it changes them. Born out of a Harvard research project and backed by Sequoia Capital, one of the largest venture capital companies in the world, it is already in use by Google, Microsoft, and governments across Asia Pacific, including a Singapore study we ran with Gemma and NTU that shaped national conversations on parenthood. And what we've seen again and again is this: when you stop asking people to tick a box and start listening to what they really believe, they surprise you. Now, here's the big shift. Traditional qual was bound by human bandwidth. AI qual is exponential, hundreds of interviews in hours in any language with full thematic analysis. and academics even approved of it. And what's even more important is that these interviews reduce bias. There's no interviewer effect. There's no pressure given to making sure the person says the right answer, just raw creative self-expression. People open up to AI like they rarely do with humans, and it's like talking to the mirror without judgment. And we know this because when we did the first study on babies, people were asked about it and they really enjoyed it. So let's talk about why voice matters in this research. People can respond to the interviews that are presented on the screen using their voice, using text, or even video. We can even record their screen. But why is voice so important? When people type responses, they self-edit, they rationalize, and they polish what they're writing. But when they speak, you get the raw, unfiltered stream of thought, and they can't take back what they've said. And that's where the real insight lives. It's how people actually think, not how they want to be seen. An AI interviewer also helps reduce biases, as I've mentioned before, especially social desirability, because AI creates a neutral, judgment-free space where people are happy to open up. There's no human to impress, so they're candid. And finally, implicit beliefs start to surface, those thoughts that people didn't know they had. They say things they didn't even think of because the voice captures that deeply, that subconscious layer. It's not about what they say, it's about how they say it, when they pause, and when their voice shifts. This is how we uncover the why behind behavior, not just the what. Look, I get it. Tick boxes were never meant to be the end goal. They were a workaround, a compromise. You remember those forms you'd filled out at school with black pencil and then they stick them in an OCR machine? Well, that's a compromise. It was simplifying research so that we could understand the complexities of things and control it. But we lost something sacred, human nuance. When we respond to lists of items using Likert scales, I'll strongly disagree to agree, we may not necessarily be reflecting what we think, the research participants. We might not even care about the things the researcher put in that list. So we don't need to choose between quant and qual anymore because AI makes it possible to have qualitative at scale and people can tell their story with open-ended questions. And that's what we're here to demonstrate. So I'm going to swing over to Kit now. He'll do a presentation, do a demonstration of the platform, and I'm really excited to see what you have to say, Kit. Thanks.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me, James, for that kind and generous introduction, as well as introducing Listen as a whole and setting the stage. So, as James mentioned, my name is Kit. I run operations here. I'm here to introduce Listen in a little bit more detail. Listen is a platform designed to enable scaling qualitative research in depth to a level that has never previously been possible with individual humans and the associated conversations. So I think the goal of what we're building is to alleviate as much of the time-consuming components of a research project and really focus on leveling up and scaling up the context, the understanding, that the experience of the researcher themselves, the human involved in this, and give them an opportunity to run research not just faster and more efficiently, but at a level of depth that can only come with the scale that something like Listen provides. So I'm just going to pull up some slides here. So what this looks like in a little bit more of a literal sense is a platform that's designed to support your research process end to end. That means starting with a high-level research objective, Listen is going to help you develop your discussion guide. It's going to go out there and look for whoever it is that you're trying to speak to, recruit them, incentivize them, and have them engage in the study at hand. It's going to, and very crucially, moderate those studies, probe into people's initial responses to those key questions, and make sure that the people are being driven and engaged to speak at a level that they would not otherwise, just in sort of that traditional open-ended question. Finally, and arguably most importantly, it's going to take all of these conversations and not just synthesize, summarize, analyze, but also deliver the materials that you need to communicate these insights to whichever stakeholders might matter for that project. So that might be compilations of highlight clips, it might be PowerPoint slides, or just a chat functionality to engage with your data in an open-ended way and work collaboratively with the platform to understand what's going on and the what's going behind the scenes, as it were. So naturally, to summarize that combination, it is the depth and the unique insights, those human level stories and passions that one gets from a real qualitative interview that can be scaled up as effectively and efficiently as your traditional survey. There is an abundance of use cases for this, naturally focused on anything that where understanding what people really think, what people's experiences really have looked like, is the most important component. And this might range from commercial use cases like brand perception or journey mapping to public policy government use cases. We've had a lot of academics, as well as Gemma's pioneering research on the Gen Z situation. I could go on forever, but something that I think often gets glossed over by this platform is beyond just the research. Is an unprecedented level of data quality and reliability that you can get, not just because you can see who is taking the studies from the videos and cross-check that with the validations and verifications that we are doing on our end. Also, we have by nature of having a full platform access and control over their experience and ability to track the way that they use it. So even if they are who they say they are, we can make sure that they're not, popping questions into ChatGPT and churning out fraudulent responses in that regard. And then lastly, it's been a priority of ours from the get-go to make sure that our data and security compliance certifications are at the bleeding edge. So we have significantly more compliance certifications than any reasonable startup would think necessary, as well as the full cohort of enterprise features from both the security standpoint, like multi-factor authentication, through to convenience, privacy, and the customer's own compliance requirements, so SSO, data protections, etc. That's the summary. I'm going to dive into a demo now. I'm interested if there's a bunch of questions. I'm good. I've got the half an eye on the chat, but I will probably save the majority of questions for the end. But please feel free to chuck those in as we go. But what I'm going to do now is throw up what it looks like to set up a study and listen. So we're going to go through. We're going to start with some high-level objective. We're going to set up a discussion guide. I'm going to show you what the recruitment side of things looks like, how the moderator works and probes and engages people, and then I'll jump to an example of an analysis for some research done in the past. But to kick things off, I like to, in order to make it a little bit more interactive and open-ended, does anybody either want to drop in the chat or maybe James or Gemma jump in with some kind of high-level research objective or prompt that we can use to deliver this study?
I think Gemma has one.
Is there anybody in the chat got an idea? I see Shilpa's here. Shilpa, you're always full of ideas. Do you want to?
Maybe the project you've run recently or you have coming up. It can be as high level as you like. I'm going to pop it in here. We're going to use that to, here we go. Trust in government to provide guidance, but not legal advice to low sophistication users. All right, I'm going to pop that. Oh my goodness. I'm going to pop that. Oh, here's the second one. Help us understand Singaporeans' resistance to turning up their aircon to 25 degrees centigrade. I'm going to put that one in just for the comical side of things. Okay, it's not letting me copy.
That's a legitimate question because you can reduce the power consumption in a city by making sure people have their air conditioner lower, and it's been thoroughly researched.
Okay, fascinating. Okay, this is something that I as somebody who lives in colder climates, I'm not familiar with. I want to understand why Singaporeans insist on keeping their AC at 25C.
25. That's very conservative. It's normally around about 21 or feels like 17 or about 10 in the MRT.
Oh, sorry. The question was help us understand Singaporeans' resistance to turning up their aircon to 25. I'm going to say 21C.
I said
What?
resist. Yeah.
What
So I
drives?
think it would resist or
Resist-
insist on keeping them really cold.
And what happens is people leave their air conditioner at 22. So when they come home, they always put it on 22. So 22 becomes the norm. If you teach them to put it on 25, when they come home, they'll get used to 25 and we'll just leave it on 25 because it feels cooler than outside. So, you know, it's a psychological trick. The other thing I heard is if you increase the temperature at the Singapore airport when people get off the plane, they'll just think it's cool in the airport. But when they walk outside, if the air conditioner is a couple of degrees higher, they'll feel less hot when they get outside. So the experience of arriving in Singapore is actually better.
The Singapore airport is untold level of mysteries in terms of the detail that famously have gone into it every turn. That doesn't surprise me whatsoever. Anyway, so I've just sort of synthesized, maybe expanded a little bit on the objective at hand. We'll keep it nice and high level, just for the purposes of seeing what it does in a slightly more open-ended context. What you're going to see is on the right-hand side here, it's going to start to put together what you can think of as a first pass at the backbone of the study guide, some suggestions of potential areas of interest, a combination of both quant and qual questions, naturally with a focus on those detailed open ends. While on the left-hand side here, it's going to be your opportunity to engage with this creation process in an open-ended way. So I might come in here and say, let's add a section asking about people's experience with AC growing up. What are strict rules at home? Oh, sorry, I don't know. I'm maybe overthinking. It sounds like you all know a lot more about AC habits than I do, but the purpose of this is, as you can see, with that sort of direction that we can give it, it's going to put together a few more questions. You can imagine that if we were doing this in more detail, there'd be a higher degree of back and forth. But once you're happy with the direction that it's moving in here, you'd come through to this next screen where on the left-hand side, this is your question by question editing functionality when you want to get into the weeds, maybe change the wording, the answer sets, skip show logic. Importantly, this is where you would do if you were putting together a concept test, you wanted to test some materials, it might be video, an image, all the way through to some usability testing for a Figma or a website. You might come through here and I'm going to actually just jump down here. Assuming this was a sort of more relevant question, you could come in here and do. And you'd see it would put up the study on the right-hand side here. You could do some website testing, that kind of thing. But this is, you get the idea. This is a slightly more familiar editing functionality. While on the right-hand side, this is what the respondent's going to be seeing. So you can test those updates and changes in real time. Speaking of, I'm now going to show how the moderator works. So what it's like to be asked an open-ended question and then probed on that topic. Unless anybody has, I'm just going to put up the chat, unless anybody has any particular questions where we are so far. Looks like we're all good.
It's interesting to see on the top right-hand side there, you can see how long the survey is going to take. Obviously, you guys are measuring everybody's surveys and or set of questions and how long people take to respond. So it's really great when you're organizing it because you can work out how much time it's going to take and therefore how much to pay those people.
Exactly. And that's not just the number of questions, but it's also the depth that those questions are likely to go into. It takes a lot of things into account. But I'm now going to answer this question. Walk me through your typical day. When do you use the air conditioner and why do you choose those specific times? I'm going to say, so a typical day, I'm waking up at home, I'm driving to work, I'm coming home at about 8 p.m. and probably in bed by midnight. I generally will always have the air conditioning on when I'm home. I have a partner, they're also go to work. So in theory that they would turn off the air conditioning when we leave, but I think in practice, we're leaving it on most of the time. Call it laziness or call it assuming that the other person is still home. It's nice to come home to a cooler house. Hello. Here we go. You mentioned leaving the AC on most of the time. What temperature do you typically set it to and why? So as you can see, it's building on the context that I've given it, taking into account and using that to probe and get into more detail. What I'd like to point out is it's not, I gave it 30 seconds of detail. it's not just picking up on a arbitrary factor of what I said and probing for the sake of probing. A crucial component of how our moderator works is it maintains a laser focus on those high-level research objectives that we started with, that we gave it when we were prompting and building the discussion guide, which in this case, we mentioned temperatures very specifically. We were talking about, why do people do 21 versus 25? How do we get them there? So you can see how it's guiding the discussion in a way that it thinks is going to be the most effective to answer those high-level questions, while crucially still delivering a fundamentally dynamic experience for the respondent, which is such an important component of a qualitative open-ended study. So that's the moderation side of things. On the recruitment side, once you're happy with how it's set up and how the moderator is going to function, you have a few different options. You can generate a link, which can be distributed via directly to your customers via Objective and their expert panels that we personally use all the time when doing Asian recruiting. Or Listen has some level of built-in recruitment functionalities, often in partnership with a preferred partner panel like Objective and their recruitment capabilities. So we can do both B2B, B2C. You'd come here, apply some pre-screening demographics, firmographics, indicate the number of people that you'd like to speak to, click apply and recruit. And the goal is that as close to one click as possible, you're able to conduct dozens, if not hundreds, of in-depth 30-minute qualitative interviews in the scope of a few hours, all being analysed and involved in the analysis in real time.
This is not available in Asia Pacific yet, but we're looking at it at the moment. So we currently do the recruitment with Research Network with our panels across 15 countries in Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. Annually, we just send them the link like Kit just showed you.
Yes. Yeah, we always work with James and the team when we're doing our Southeast Asian recruitment. Highly vetted. We vet people very much on their ability, panels, but very much on their ability to deliver respondents that are going to be engaged, that want to chat and get into the weeds of some question. They're facing a computer screen, they're focused and not just sort of on their phone whilst they're doing something else. And so I can very much speak to the quality of James and his recruitment capabilities. But yes, that's the setup, that's the study, that's how we're going to go out and engage people and find them. Naturally, the next step is the analysis. So I'm going to jump to a study that we ran on testing a few different concepts and packaging concepts for sparkling water, specifically focused around Liquid Death as a brand. This is 200 consumers in the demographics that were most relevant. So what we're going to see as we scroll through this: crucial summaries, insights, answers to those key fundamental overall questions, always backed up and validated by a specific quote or clip to the extent to which it's relevant. We're going to scroll through here and see summaries to some of the multiple choice questions, segmented in ways that might be most interesting and engaging. But I'm going to skip now to the answers to the first open-ended question. I often get quite overexcited by the platform's ability to quantify the qualitative data. So because of the depth and the amount of information that people are giving about an answer to some open-ended, what is your initial impression of this product, it can identify some potentially interesting insights where you might want to later draw those crucial relative numerical comparisons between segment A and segment B or whatever it may be. And it's going to do its best to categorize and bucket people into those. So in this case, it's got a summary of negatives, of sentiment, purchase intent, bucketing of key drivers of negative reactions, positive reactions, etc. And as is a key theme in our platform generally, you're always going to be able to see exactly who has been put into which bucket, as well as efficiently as possible being shown a specific quote or clip that it's going to help you build that trust and verify that somebody is in the right bucket and or move them as you see fit. Moving on to some of the materials that's going to be developed. First, we've got video highlight reels, compilations of some of the most interesting and relevant responses on some theme. That is often a very engaging way to communicate some insights or some findings to sorted stakeholders. It's going to suggest some, again, according to those key themes and original questions, but you're able to generate a brand new set of clips in a fully open-ended way. So you might prompt it to say, give me a set of clips that communicate why millennials having a negative sentiment on the whole and how that differs from Gen Z perspectives. And it's going to, compile some relevant clips to the extent to which they're there, or give some kind of discussion as to the direction in which that's going.
That's one of the single most frustrating things for my 20 years doing research, is putting clips together. And when I saw this, you can literally chat to the clips and it'll do it automatically. It's unbelievable. Unfortunately, you can't upload your own clips in there though, guys.
Yeah, you just ask it for whatever you want, and it's going to put this. It takes a couple of minutes. So I'm not going to do it now, but the idea is to make it intuitive and easy, as well as those highlight clips. PowerPoint slides, crucially in PowerPoint, not just some weird PDF slide format. By default, it's going to put together its ability, the best pass at answering. Again, going back to those key questions, that is generally its focus and goal. But much like those video highlight clips, you can prompt it to develop a set of slides to communicate any insight or message that might be most relevant. And you might say, give me a set of slides that communicate why this population, segment A has declining sentiment over time, segment B has increasing sentiment, while segment C is largely uninterested in the product as a whole. And it's going to do its best to split the slides according to how you've defined it. And it might be 5, 10, 50 slides that it thinks is necessary to communicate that. I'm seeing a couple of questions here. What sort of sample sizes do you recommend? Obviously, it depends on the segment, but where I might have done 10 to 50 in the past, is this platform make volume easier to generate? Absolutely. So that is a crucial component of the AI moderator, is that you're not limited by the time it takes to interview an individual or the resources that you have to go out and conduct those qualitative interviews. So we're generally recommending 1 to 200 interviews if you're sort of not spitting on any strict criteria. But the moment you're looking to subsection that into a series of sort of predefined segments, you're probably going to want to increase that overall N, depending on the kind of questions you're using and the objectives of that research. Another question here: can the data or customer interviews be stored onshore in Singapore? Unfortunately not. So all of our data is stored in our sort of industry standard cloud providers. The customer has full ownership over the data. So you have the full ability to export it, have us delete it, have us give you access in any way that you like. But in terms of hosting on the platform, that is still for now restricted within our sort of best practices and guidelines. One issue I've faced using AI transcribing tool before is that it doesn't fully capture the Singaporean accent, which in return gives inaccurate transcribing and notes. How does it address this issue? So traditionally, the way that this does functions the transcription wise is it's not like when you're talking to Google Translate or I don't know what the sort of most obvious version of or experience with transcription is. It layers on actually several different AI models to contextually transcribe what somebody's talking about, incorporating not just the topic of conversation, but also the nature of the questions being asked, the nature of any other context that you might have given it, both for that question, for the study as a whole, or just in the way that you've been engaging with the tool. And it's going to use that to pick up accents specifically, but also the phrasing of words, maybe brand names, maybe slang or terms like this. There's a whole actually another model that is responsible purely for keeping the sort of primary key foundation models up to date. So it's generally very aware of what's going on within the last sort of couple of weeks or months. It's not going to reference the news or events, but it's going to be generally familiar with terms or companies and that kind of thing. I hope that answers your question, but the transcription is really very good. It also speaks almost 100 languages at this point. So, not just accents, but crucially people conducting the interviews themselves in whichever language you've enabled.
Hey, Kit, you might be worth mentioning how fantastic your developers are. I saw a post a couple of days ago saying they were like in the top 1% of developers in the world or something.
So not just the top 1%. So our core founding team of developers were medalists in the International Olympiad for coding as they grew up. That's actually how they know each other. They were friends in Germany as they became first and second. The other two were second in different competitions in foundational coding problems. So they were top 1% among competitive coders. They were sort of generally very good at this stuff. We have a deeply technical team, which I think is a key part of the DNA of our platform.
And they're actually really lovely guys, and they're very
yeah,
they're very responsive
lovely
right
gentlemen.
now. Although Listen did formally launch a few weeks ago and has gone completely nuts, so maybe they won't be as available. But they're really yeah.
Yes, we're a little bit we're all for good reasons, but doing our best to stay on top of everything. Which countries is the data stored? For now, baseline US and US West specifically. So in the sort of primary HQ servers and data centers of our hosting providers. Next question. Oh, sorry, I saw that you answered that, James. Apologies. As this is AI moderated, what is the recommended duration for conducting each session before the respondent fatigue or dropout happens? I think the sweet spot is probably between 20 and 40 minutes. We have a lot of people going well over an hour for some study. I think as you get to the 45-minute mark, depending on the topic and what's being asked, you might start to see some fatigue. I think much less than about 15, 20 minutes. You're only asking a couple of those really deep probing questions. So yeah, 20 to 40 minutes is probably the sweet spot, but there's really no rules. We've got lots of people that run hour and a half long interviews for whatever reason. All right. I'm up to date on the questions. I've almost finished the overview of the analysis. I think the last feature that I have yet to show was the chat functionality, which may be self-explanatory to some, but it's table stakes at this point. Is just the opportunity to engage with the data in an open-ended way. This is the sort of the mouthpiece of the collaborative nature of the platform. It's where you might say something as simple as like, gather me quotes that are validating this insight or finding. Or it might just be, is there an interesting segmentation here? Do you notice a theme among the people that are talking about this that might be used to define some kind of archetype of usage? Whatever it might be. So this is how you might sort of have those initial interactions with the data that you might then use to prompt clips or slides, etc., to then communicate that in a more sort of cohesive and visual way. But that's the whistle-stop tour of Listen. Excited to answer more questions now, later in the Q&A that I think is scheduled later on in the meeting. But yeah, anything to add, James?
No, any questions before we move on to our fireside chat? Nothing's coming up. All right, let me see if I can share my screen. All right. Just see my screen, right?
Yeah.
All right. So what I want to do now is have around about a 20-minute conversation with Gemma and Kit, and we'll go more deeply into why this work matters, how it works, what it unlocks. I'll be your moderator, and I'll be bringing any of your live questions in at the end of our first part. And so please update anything. You can actually use the Q&A or the chat. Maybe the Q&A is easier. So we'll start with why neuroscience shows that real conversations reveal more than surveys, and how can AI do this even better. Gemma will share some insights from her Gen Z studies, looking at belief, emotion, language, and embodied cognition. Then Kit will walk us through how Listen Labs captures and scales those deep insights with real examples. Next, we'll dig into how AI was trained and what makes it more powerful and trustworthy than something like ChatGPT. You'll hear how it has already been used by major multinationals, and behind the scenes, what has happened when Gemma's research assistant tried to use ChatGPT instead. And finally, the big one, barriers to adoption. What do you say when a client says AI is rubbish? Gemma will share how she responds, and Kit will explain how trust in the methodology and data has been designed right into the system, so you never were left wondering what was going on. So over to you, Gemma. Perhaps you can talk to us more about how neuroscience shows that real conversations reveal more than surveys.
Thanks, James. I think this is probably more apt as a aircon side chat rather than a fireside chat. Yeah, so, well, I think we've covered a lot of this in the introduction. I guess from a neuroscientific perspective, it's very well established that, of course, when you look at how humans make decisions, including what they're about to say, emotions and deeply held beliefs are activated first. We can see this if we look at the time course of activity through the brain when people are asked to make decisions. And it's only sort of later on that you get this logical, rational reasoning response. And often that is clouded by people's concern about how they should appear, what they should say, what they think the experimenter is expecting them to say. And that really negates the function of research that is designed to be predictive about how people are going to behave. Because we've seen time and time again with traditional qual and quant approaches that they fail to predict what's going to happen in the marketplace, right? And this costs manufacturing and marketers literally millions of dollars each year as they use these types of strategies to confirm whether or not to go ahead with the launch of a new product, for example. And 80% of those or more in some markets fail within their first year to market, backed by confirmatory research, i.e., people ticking boxes or focus groups, which is fraught with group dynamics and so forth, which would back such a launch. Yep, I'm going to buy it. This is a great idea. And yet there's clearly a gap between what people say and what they're going to do, and particularly so if you give them all the time in the world. So one of the things that I found about this system when we were studying Singapore youth attitudes to having families is that there's a very real difference between being interviewed by a non-objective, non-judgy, I would say, AI than a face-to-face human interviewer. And I'll give you a case in point. If you start to, it was me, right? And I'm the interviewer, and I start talking to teenage boys about their opinion on condom use, what you will hear is this. Nothing. You can hear a pin drop. So obviously there's a concern about what I might think and that I would be judging them. And then, what should I say? How should I say it? What if I don't know the answer? I've got to make up something because I don't want to sit there looking like, dumb and I can't, react, or all of that. Again, it just sort of totally clouds what we're trying to get at. So one of the things I noticed is that when we obtain consent for our initial respondents in Gen Z to either talk about youth attitudes or we're doing something at the moment on social media and how they feel, they're sitting there like they normally do. They're kind of young, right? So like 15, 16, in bed with the hoodie on the laptop. And they're chatting to this thing, either tapping, tap, 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 or chatting away in the language that they use. Bruh, like, yeah, like this and that. And, my mate's doing...
Gemma has an 18-year-old daughter, by the way.
Who, embarrassing, is actually listening, I think. So present company excluded. They have, different generations have a different lingo, right? Which the older amongst us aren't necessarily tapped in to. So we don't know, what half of this stuff is and the nuances. And the other thing which is really important about language and natural language, as opposed to this sort of formal face-to-face of I ask you a question and you do your damn best, including in any kind of interview, job interview, to put your best foot forward, right? And to come across as articulate, as considered, as socially acceptable. And that's not what we're trying to get at. So when they're just speaking naturally, there's a phenomenon called embodied cognition, which really refers to the fact that in our natural speech, we give away through our speech patterns, our hesitations, and our tone, the feelings and emotions that are really true and percolating beneath the surface. And that is information which can also be captured in a AI to face interview of this nature. And I know that Listen Labs is working really hard to be able to incorporate all of those aspects of natural speech to deduce the emotional state of the speaker, as well as being able to extract the themes of what they're actually talking about. So when we looked at the transcripts and responses of the Singaporean youth, we were detecting not only kind of main themes, which I think the I mean, it's in mainstream research that the Singapore government has been doing, that they're concerned, of course, about finances and about emotional readiness and things like that. But they were coming up in response to the AI and not standard interviews, with a whole bunch of other things, like having non-standard family structures, perhaps sharing the parenting with girlfriends rather than, like a set of adults rather than, traditional husband-wife type marriage. They were talking about generational trauma, and worried about not being able to parent properly, concerned that they might pass those negative behaviors on to their kids. And of course that has policy implications, like to provide support for our young people here. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think for me it was a very engaging and intriguing experience, since I've worked in my own businesses in extracting people's implicit responses. But that's a very kind of paradigmatic approach, and can't capture natural speech. So this is a sort of halfway house, if you like, between the face-to-face interview and the kind of sort of laboratory style implicit System 1 research that I'm very much used to, and that's why in combination I think it's a very, very powerful approach.
Can you, Gemma, can you explain what you do when it comes to things like fMRI and that kind of thing, the stuff your thesis was on that got published in Nature? And just briefly, but then why did you do that stuff, and why are you interested in this type of research using the AI? Because I think that's fascinating. It's where this discussion began with you and I when we started talking about leveraging this platform.
Well, I was trying to do research on my on schizophrenia, and specifically how like people who are deaf and have schizophrenia start reporting auditory hallucinations, right? And we thought, but that's a bit strange, because you're deaf and you communicate through sign language, so how are these hallucinations, quote unquote, auditory? And they would say, well, look, you know what hearing is. Now I know what hearing is. Why what is this to you? And so we couldn't figure out what they were saying. And by being able to put somebody in one of these scanners and see for the first time in history how the brain is generating the experiences that we subjectively have, was just mind-blowing. And you can sort of literally see System 1 working, which is so difficult, isn't it, to be able to read people's subconscious thoughts or people's private thoughts, or what's actually going on in terms of the computations in the brain that is leading them to make responses in the way that they do. And working at the interface of fMRI and psychology when it first came out was so exciting. And I see now that we're in a new era where we're looking at the interface between neuroscience and AI. And I think the lessons that we're learning from the Listen Labs platform about the sheer capability of interaction between human and AI, and how it can get at a much deeper emotional connection with humans in sometimes the face-to-face human-to-human interaction is sort of different, is really exciting. So I'm sort of seeing history repeat itself. And this time, you know, it's not fMRI psychology, it's neuroscience and AI.
Yeah, thanks, Gemma. That's really cool. I'm seeing the same thing. You know, I use AI a lot to help with my thinking and writing and personal insights into things. And what I write a lot about on LinkedIn is how AI is a reflection of you. And you know, you can use it to do that. And many people don't even have that level of awareness to be able to realize that you know the way the AI is responding to them is the way that they're asking it questions. And so in the same context, when somebody is talking to the AI in an AI interview run by Listen Labs, they're seeing a reflection of what they say, and they hopefully can have some personal insights on that when the AI is asking those questions. I mean, when I was at university in Adelaide, South Australia, I did Lifeline for a couple of years as a voluntary thing for the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, which I'm sure Kit would know, the Duke of Edinburgh Award. So I was doing that as my service thing, and I was always fascinated by how much help I could give somebody without actually sitting down to them face to face. I was on the phone. And then when I was first started my business in Australia, when we were doing user experience design and research, we designed a system for psychologists to provide counselling via the web. And when we were organising that system, the research that we did a priori was discovered that people wanted to chat. They didn't want to talk. They didn't want to voice. They didn't want to see anybody. They wanted to chat. And this is exactly what we have now. And this is exactly why Listen Labs is gone absolutely crazy and have done all of their sales revenue targets from Sequoia for this whole year in the first month. So that's pretty cool. But the reason is that this method of talking to a computer is very, very good. Over to you, Kit. So can you tell us a little bit more
Yes,
about your perspective?
I don't
I'm
have
sure
a
you
huge
had
amount to
lots of
add.
ideas.
Thank you so much both to speak to that. It's such an interesting thing to think about, right? Is the concept of you know, I think when people think of speaking to a screen, it's based on an outdated sense of what that means. It's it feels a lot more like speaking to yourself, but with very well constructed, you know, it's like the concept of active listening, right? It's like it's you're seeing the recording of yourself and you're answering a question, then you're prompted to really sort of engage and go that sort of level deeper. And so once you remove that scrutiny of somebody on the other side, it feels entirely personal. It's like an inner monologue out loud, but you sort of you start with that first level thought, the first thing that might come to mind, and it very creatively and effectively will then push to understand, okay, well, having mentioned this, like what do you think about this, or give me an example, or talk me through how you came to this thought process, all while sort of very tactically guiding the discussion towards what is most crucial and relevant. I mean, so many examples of what this means and can look like. I think I saw, James, that you shared the personality test in the group chat. Yes, this is just a fun little thing that we put together to for people to experience what it's like to take an AI moderated interview or discussion. It's only a few minutes. I get a text maybe once a week from a friend. It might be a close friend, it might be a roommate, it might be somebody I haven't spoken to in 3 or 4 years, reaching out saying, hey, just came across Listen on this, that, or the other, happened to come across your personality test. I am, embarrassed at the extent to which I poured my heart out to this robot for that time, because why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you just be sort of answering in a totally genuine way? Because again, that scrutiny has been removed. Many more sort of sorry.
And in the same context, what we've found is that, when clients see the tool, they give us everything that they want to test in a study or in an interview or in a survey. They give us everything. And then sometimes when I go back with an example of what they need to be asking people, they're like, oh, that's too broad. It's not coming down to what we want to know. And I say, well, That's the point. We don't want to know what you want to know. We want to know what your customers think. And the only way we can do that is to ask a really open question. You know, if we're talking about if we're doing research on the taste of a coffee in a coffee shop, we don't say to them, "What do you think of the taste of the coffee?" We start with, "What do you think of the experience of being in the coffee shop?" And the taste of the coffee may not be of any interest to them because the coffee shop's near their house, and they just go because it's convenient. So we can't put things in people's minds. So the way that we tailor the questions to the openness that's required so that we can uncover what people really think and what people really believe in. People just go about their day doing stuff and they don't necessarily think about, well, what's the belief that is guiding me to do that kind of thing? And if we don't ever ask them about it, or ever even ask them the question, then they're not going to tell us, right? This is the classic reason why we like using eye tracking in research, because we see what people do unconsciously. So in the same way, if we ask the right questions with Listen Labs, we can uncover that unconscious stuff, that the beliefs which were hidden down in the depths of people's minds, which were never spoken about. Great. So moving on, when we look at doing this, one of the things that people don't understand, when we're talking to clients or whatever, is this the same as ChatGPT? Is this any better than the ChatGPT that I've designed to be my intelligent worker for free? Can't I just make up something else? And this is a question we spoke about this when we were preparing yesterday, Kit. But can you give us an insight into how the designers and developers on your team made this work so well?
Absolutely. I could go into tiresome detail on a long list of things. What I'll do is I'll touch on at a high level the sort of technical design of things and the approach of what that looks like. I'll then go back to sort of, I think, our key design methodology and what that's looked like and what that's resulted in. So on the sort of architectural side, you sort of hinted at this already when I've been discussing it. There is a series of the largest models. We have a sort of strong preference for the generative pre-trained ones that I said driving maybe the moderation side of things, or the first round of analysis, or the sort of railroads of the process and the supporting process. There are then, I was going to say dozens of sort of smaller specialized models that might be doing some specific component, fine-tuned, trained, or very explicitly given best practices for something. Examples of this might be the first pass of developing the discussion guide from that prompt is something that has required a sort of a very, very rigorously tested set of inputs on what is a discussion guide, what is a best practice here, how do you balance the sort of delivering on what it means to construct a discussion guide in that qualitative sense, while still balancing the input that you're given. I could talk about it, dozens of other, but yes, there is some.
Does that mean you just ripped off a whole lot of that discussion guides that people had used in the past for a regular interview?
No. So well, ripped off. Yes, discussion guides that I've used in my former life as a researcher or designed and had vetted examples. It's not as many as you think. So we tested with, what if we give it 1,000 discussion guides or 10,000? And what we've actually found is that it is trained on about 120, 125 discussion guides that encourage it to understand exactly how to construct a set of questions to go from the very high level, broad understanding of somebody's experience towards some key goal and understanding within the subcontext of an overall discussion guide, while also giving it the breadth across functionally 11 core different archetypes of discussion guides. Again, this is our sort of trial and error almost level of experimentation with how we are building this what we're hoping is the most effective sort of research assistant you ever come across, as if they have the sort of, in terms of the best practices, decades of experience, but in terms of the way that you engage with it, they are the sort of junior, brand new person who is just rigorously executing exactly what you hope that they would, but based on the sort of arbitrary high-level stream of consciousness, context, and instructions that you might give that research assistant. So
that's actually, before you go on, something really interesting, probably worth talking with you and Gemma about, is this issue. I mean, I can remember when one of my staff, who was a young researcher, used Listen Labs for the first time, and they'd not really done much interview scripting before. They'd just been taking notes with other people's research. And there's a lot of assumptions made by them, and that they believe that the system is doing the right thing. And this could be, a seasoned business person who maybe hasn't done so much research, but thinks, oh, I've got this tool now, I can do it all because the AI is going to help me. But the classic problem is that if they don't have the experience doing the real stuff, they don't necessarily know that what they're reading on the screen is of any quality. So this is why we help clients to, do this stuff in the first few rounds of testing. If they're going to sign up for a subscription or something to you guys, we help them to make sure they know what's going on. But how do we manage this? I mean, maybe from your perspective, Gemma, what's your fear when it comes to academia and teaching students how to think about the particular area that they're focused on, whether it's marketing or business or whatever, versus just them going away and using AI and making up stuff? And then, Kit, how do you manage that? So to you, Gemma, first.
I think it's the same as teaching in the past them how to write. So of course you can write anything, can't you? Or you can get somebody, to do your homework for you. In the past, you could do that. I mean, that's basically what you're doing with ChatGPT. If you generate an essay, through and not answering it yourself. And I think one of the things that the education sector is now scrambling to catch up with is the fact that, look, it's not going away, these generative AI models, and we have, and they're useful and they're great, and there's so much that's positive. But now the proposition is to teach prompt engineering and how to interact with this, because if you consider that Listen Labs has got a great platform, sure, but without a great designer on board, then what you put in, you're going to get out is kind of, if you put in rubbish, you're going to get out rubbish. So if I designed the script, say on the air conditioning study, right, I go through multiple iterations, and I take advice, I go and talk to people in this sector, I refine, and all of that sort of thing. So it's not a question that I will do this, and then I will ask one of my undergraduate students to come here and say, here you go, here's the theme, go forth and do that with Listen Labs, and I promise you we will get very different output.
I think for me, the thing that I do, when I'm prompting these Gen AI systems, is to ask myself, why am I asking this question, and why do I believe that I need to even know this at all, right? And if you also say, if you're working for a client or you're working for your boss, why does that person believe they need to even ask this question?
Why do they care? Why should
do they care?
So I mean, actually, and not only do I go and interview people just to find out, what are their pain points or what are their challenges, what do you know, what do you don't know, what would you like to know? You can also use ChatGPT or other models to brainstorm. And then once you've brainstormed, and I know, that we've looked at this for, you can actually take the output of that and stick it into the Listen Labs AI and work with that. And it's AI, it kind of polishes it up as well, right? So it's all about managing a multitude of AIs working together, because I think one of the advantages that Listen Labs has is that it is, unlike ChatGPT, which does everything for everybody, right? It's a jack of all trades, but master of none. And when you've got a tailored platform like this, it's really been trained specifically to optimize what it's doing, what it's been asked to do, which is to interview and gather information at depth, and then assimilate and interpret. And in my own experience, I and something which I don't know the audience might be interested in. I ran this study, and then with Listen Labs, and I asked my postdoc to extract the raw data, which you can have. You can have all the transcripts for every interview. That's fine. You can extract it all, and you can stick it in SPSS, and you can analyze it any which way but loose, all right, as you wish. But you can also ask ChatGPT to analyze it. So I asked him to do exactly that. And it kind of bore out what I've just said about the jack of all trades, because what it returned was very vague. There were sort of missing bits. The themes were not very well specified. The quotes that it pulled out didn't necessarily support the themes. They were accurate, in some cases fabricated quotes from the data. So I had to go back in and check, did subject 309 actually say this? And in some cases, ChatGPT's fabricated it. And so I said, well, don't do that. That's very naughty. Go back in and verify. But again, I didn't feel that it had the training, and of course it hasn't, right? It hasn't been trained specifically to perform this function optimally. Yeah. So this is what I felt about, you can't just use ChatGPT to do this. It's not, it's doing too many other things.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's not even. I mean, so many thoughts, but to sort of go take what you're talking about and explain how we think of exactly that. It's not about training the tool on what to do, right? ChatGPT knows everything that has ever been written down ever, to some degree. It's about teaching it how to get somewhere, how to incorporate somebody. And this has been a very, very intentional design decision for us. At no point is Listen ever supposed to be a black box where you're asking it something and it's telling you what to think. For some categories of individuals that might be better, and maybe it's a trade-off that we've acknowledged, but we are laser focused on not doing the research, but augmenting the researcher. And I think that the one of our real unique sort of identifiers is how we've very delicately balanced encouraging and incorporating as much context, as much input, as much guidance as you would or would not like to give, but in a totally unstructured way, in the way that comes to mind first. In the same way, passing in the corridor, this junior researcher might say, "Oh, don't forget, like if when you ask this, I think people are going to say that," or "Oh, I think just I have a hunch that this population is going to be a bit hesitant or resistant about this topic or this theme," and that's all it takes for Listen to go, "Okay, I fully, I'm incorporating that into what we've talked about so far, and I understand I'm going to flex how I'm going to engage with people in that way." And as I said again, trying to as much as possible reflect exactly how you as the researcher would conduct some research or conduct that interview, as long as you are giving it that helping hand. It's trying to get you the information you need to draw your own conclusions as efficiently and effectively as possible. You're never going to just, again, be told what to think or have to ask, like, where has this come from? What's going on? Why is it doing this? It's trying to make this as transparent and clear as possible, with the goal of building that trust as a collaborator rather than as a unique and self-sufficient tool.
Yeah, that's great. That flows into the next question I had, which was about trusting the system. And I think what Listen does really well is that when you see an analysis in the analysis tab in the platform, you can see little hyperlinks with numbers to the actual quote that's being referenced, and you can read that quote. And you can click on it and see it in the context of what they were talking about, and you can listen to it if there's a recording turned on. So, like, in terms of trusting the data, like, it's not making stuff up, because there's a very, very strong link. And I think that's one of the really brilliant user experiences in the way the UI has been designed, which really puts listen ahead of any other platforms that are doing this. Gemma, when you're talking to your colleagues, with the glasses at the end of your nose, because Gemma does have a sore eye, everybody. That's why she was moving around a lot before. But when you're talking to your colleagues and about using AI, what do you say when they say, "I don't trust this, it's rubbish, we should be doing it ourselves"?
Well, that's an empirical question, isn't it? So, as any academic, we want to see the raw data. And I think Listen Labs allows us to do that. So that's why we did put this postdoc onto the test, because at the end of the day, some of the statistical analyses that we might have to perform in order to get a paper through peer review in an academic journal, and you wouldn't necessarily have the stringency or strictness if you're doing a market research study, obviously for a client. This is at a much more robust level of interpretation and assessment of the data. So I set about using a different tool to analyze the data. And we we're getting very similar output. As you say, it's very clear to see where all the transcripts, where the high level report, which are the quotes that it's actually used to come to these conclusions and to extract these themes. So it's very, very transparent. And I think it's important for academics to know that, firstly, that, and secondly, that you have access to all the raw data, and therefore it is not a black box. It is not ChatGPT. And if there is demand in academia for this platform, which I'm sure there really will be, engage with Listen Labs and say, like, we would like to be able to run, for example, some, these types of statistics, some clustering or some, specific statistical tests and analysis of variance and so forth within the platform. I can do a few of these things, but it's just a matter of requesting that, or you can take the data out. So I don't, once I said that, and I had also engaged with Alfred, one of the founders, asking them, putting and posing some of their questions, including mine, to him. He was able to be very specific about what we have done and what we have not done and what he can do and what he cannot do, and at this stage, and this is still at a very early development stage, which you're on second round of a considerable amount of funding. So the technology and this platform is just going to get more and more robust over time. So that's my answer to them.
Fabulous. And Kit, can you tell us a little bit about that question? What many academics and researchers, very experienced researchers, particularly on the government side, have said to Gemma and I is, how do we control the way that the multivariate analysis is being done by the AI, because we need to justify what's happened to the journals before we publish. And I know that this has been considered and is something that's relevant because it has to be there. What is Listen's perspective there, Kit?
So in terms of that kind of analysis, that's not something that Listen is doing, behind closed doors or in and of itself, or even functionally and structurally within the platform. It is, so if we're talking about the way that it goes about categorizing people or bucketing people into this or that, it's doing that on a fundamental sentimental and contextual understanding of what this person says and relative to the type of categorization. It is fundamentally subjective, that type of quantification. It is, I think, not a lie, but a misrepresentation to pretend that if we just had, oh look, everybody fits into these 1 to 5 boxes cleanly, don't worry about how or why, let's move on. As I keep going back to, you're always going to be able to see we want you to go and see who's in what, why. It's going to show you the most relevant quote or clip that it wants you to quickly flick through, validate, move people accordingly, but build that trust over time. So you can take these quantifications and then run, if you want to run your analysis over the top of that, by all means. But it is based and focused on that open-ended qualitative data, synthesizing, quantifying that to the extent to which it's most valuable, and making that as transparent and visible as it does so. I just want to also on the topic of trust, want to acknowledge that the fact that this has been, it's been a few months now since we've done our public launch, and may or may not have seen us online and raised our Series A. But this has been a sort of development process over almost 2 years at this point, since almost the very start release of generative AI capabilities. It is been a very intentional decision of ours as we have gone through this process and landed on this researcher-centric design as a focus, that has come from a structural collaboration with customers or companies that we were very specific about targeting to be our first sort of design partners. So it's customers that fit into 2 buckets. It's the sort of leaders in AI, the designers of the models, the people that know the best way to use it. So that's Google, Microsoft, and a bit more recently Anthropic, but the sort of the full range on the deep tech side. And then the companies that have the strictest, most fleshed out, most clearly defined best practices in the world of qualitative research, which is some of your large CPG companies like P&G and Nestle. And among those small handful of quite large initial customers, it has been how it has been the sort of crucial differentiator in how we've gone about designing that, because we've been so lucky to have such expert input at every step of the way, and how to sort of merge these 2 fundamental components of our platform and its capabilities in order to deliver what it can do right now.
That's phenomenal. I can see Gemma smiling because she knows those companies very well. Fantastic. All right. Well, we might move to questions from the floor now. If you need to want to add any more in, please do so. But I've just got one here open from Thomas Brauch, and he asked, for recorded interviews, what if any data privacy issues exist? Now, of course, there are privacy issues. We make sure that we get all of the right agreements from participants when we recruit them, but I think Kit can probably talk a little bit more about that.
I can talk about the compliance side of things till the cows come home. On the theme of trust and reliability, you can think about that sort of tattooed on our forehead. We are ridiculously over-invested in our compliance and InfoSec certifications for a company of our size. We've got 3 different ISO certificates and the associated audits, one for privacy, one for information security, and one, a brand new one for AI and best practices in terms of safety guidelines around that. We are procured with some of the largest companies in the world, and I'd somewhat joke about it, but like consistently are beating the records when I talked to, literally this morning talking to Logitech, who are like, our onboarding procurement process, it takes ages, and our new vendors struggle with it so much. And I'm like, do not sweat it. This is the 4th time this week that I've heard that. We were procured with Microsoft. Everybody said it takes at least a year. We did it in a month, just because we've designed everything. We've designed everything to be able to just say yes to all the questions. The data is totally siloed, totally private. It doesn't train a single model. It doesn't touch anything. It is total ownership for the individuals, to delete, edit as they see fit. We are merely there to support that in a totally siloed environment. Again, I could talk about it till the cows come home. That's the sort of
I need to talk to you later and write a big blog post about that, because it's the single most question. The bigger the company and the more aligned with government they are, the more we get those questions.
Naturally, I can imagine. Yeah.
Fabulous. All right, now moving on to a question from Andrew Chia. How does it go from recruitment to call to chat? Is there any need for the human to introduce the AI? Does the AI introduce itself? I'll let you answer that, Kit.
Yeah. So when somebody, I can actually show you what it looks like when somebody gets onto the, gets onto the platform to take a study for the first time. This is the one we made earlier. It's immediately and always transparent that this is going to be an AI moderated or AI powered study, but it doesn't feel like that. There's no weird AI avatar. It is functionally text on the screen. That oh, I haven't published it. Functionally text on the screen the same way like a normal survey might be, except when you get asked an open-ended question, the next question is going to be tailored to your experience. So this is what it looks like. You come on, you take this, you have your multiple choice questions. There's no like, screen coming up. And then this is what we saw earlier, right? Where I answer the question. I wake up early, I set my AC to 14 degrees Celsius and I keep it there 23 hours a day. It's the next question that is then generative based on what that person said. So there's no need to sort of have somebody introduce the AI. It's just a fundamentally dynamic, open-ended question experience. Does that kind of answer your question? Maybe slightly long-winded, but hopefully demonstrative.
I think so. If you're there, Andrew, let us know.
Super.
All right. We might move on to the next question here from Gwen So. We'd like to clarify about how the data relevance, especially where respondents deviate from the question or digress into other topics, not because of how the question is framed, but mainly the respondent factor. How well does the AI pick this up? Over to you, Kit.
It's physically unable to go off topic. You can test it, push it. It's going to work with what you say, and if there's a chance that it might be relevant to answering those key objectives, it might bring that up. But most of the time, it's going to engage in a very human-like way. If it's like, sorry, just to be clear, it sounds to me as though I'm asking you about air conditioners, but for whatever reason, you're talking about chocolate bars. Like, have I understood correctly, or are you intentionally just off topic? If so, can we bring it back to the question at hand? Yeah, let me. I'm going to share the link, the participant link to the study we just made. Very much encourage you to try and break it, try and see if you can get it off topic and talk about something weird or irrelevant. Please let me know if you do. We're always on the lookout for ways to improve. But it's part of the structural design to it's only ever asking somebody if it thinks that question is very directly going to add color, add detail, add insight to the key questions at hand.
Fantastic. Thank you. Everyone will send the video of this webinar as well as a summary and all of the links that have been posted so that everybody has them and you can share them around. The next question from we got from GP. How effective is the tool at reading human micro expressions, capturing nuances of their responses, e.g. the customer hesitating and squinting their eyes, expression of disgust and anger in their face? This is very close to my world of eye tracking. I know it's not integrated yet, but it's only a matter of time.
Yes, no, I think there's, especially on the usability testing side, we could do with some of that eye tracking and well, motion recording. But listen, the purpose of the video, the AI is not looking at that or drawing any sentimental understanding of what is going on in somebody's face whatsoever. This has been a very intentional design decision. Again, we could do this. We have extensively experimented with layering on potential context that might come from some of these expressions, micro expressions. There might be a day in the near or far future at which we think that kind of technology is up to the level that we hold ourselves to. But we decided that if anything, it's much more often a distraction versus what people are actually saying. We have decided instead to really optimize for asking the best and most relevant and most thought-provoking follow-up questions that are going to have somebody say something out loud that they might not have initially thought in the first place. And force themselves to go a level deeper in some insight or experience or description of what's going on, And we found that that is significantly more valuable and descriptive and consistently on topic and on the nose versus trying to juggle something that at least right now technology is not able to sufficiently put together much.
Great, thank you. Did anybody else have any further questions? If you want to speak, you can just click on the raise hand button and then Geraldine will let you in to speak. What about you, Gemma? Did you have any questions of Kit?
No, I mean, you know, I think what you just talked about makes sense, but obviously, as a reader of, you know, not just speech but nonverbal cues and emotions, I think that would be, you know, a suitable proposition for your round 3 funding, because I think to be able to integrate the emotional cues, which you know, are detected in people's speech and give you an indication of whether they're, like I am just speaking off the top of the cuff, or if I'm hesitating, I'm thinking. You can see that I'm thinking what to say, and that's important, not now, but it's important if you were asking me about a complicated topic and I'm thinking, oh, you know, like it's a sensitive topic perhaps, and I'm thinking about how I want to answer that and how much I do or don't want to disclose. And I think it's important information to you know, for the algorithm to be able to discriminate between a thoughtful response and a genuinely gushing emotional one that's just come out from system 1.
Absolutely. Yes, I get overexcited on the topic because there's so much exciting work to be done here to you know, I see years of improvement for how Listen is going about and getting and engaging people in this way. In my head, that if I had all the time in the world, I'd love to sit down and run like a bunch of tests on trying to pick up what we can, focusing on using it on the analysis side first, rather than immediately using it to sort of guide the discussions itself, and seeing if, like, okay, can we look at a verbal description of people's sentiment, experience, analysis, you know, description of some topic, and then layer on, you know, maybe it's a confidence of what they said, or a sort of metric for enthusiasm or emphaticness, or yeah, it's like, you know, somebody's essentially sentiment or descriptive sentiment gets weighted by, well, you know, they hesitate to some degree. There's like 4 variables that we're using to sort of create some, I don't know, I'm getting massively carried away here, but
Well, I think, I mean, the
I'd love
first
to do
thing,
it.
just like what do they call lie detection systems? Of course, you have to have some period of interaction with the individual to look at their baseline responding is like.
Right.
And then, you know, I think it would be very insightful, because I think the AI would be able to assess the emotional mindset at the time of answering specific questions, to then go, okay, let's revisit question number 4, because that was very, you know, the respondent answers in a very different and much slower way and a much more hesitant way, and I think they're hiding something there. Either we just you know, we probe a little bit further, or we perhaps disregard that as a entirely truthful you know, state of affairs in that particular, for that particular question. It would just improve the accuracy, of course, of the algorithm.
And not just the accuracy, the extent, I don't know, a whole nother layer of dynamism to the way the conversation. I don't know. Sorry, I won't talk about it forever. I really could though. So, but it's a great question. Right now, no inclusion of micro expressions. Lots to be done. Probably at the point at which we feel like we've perfected its ability to ask the follow-up questions. From there, who knows how far we've got. We get to experiment in terms of leveling that up.
I think that's a good point to sort of wrap things up on. The thing which Alfred has always said is that you need to keep this as simple as possible, and, you know, just ask people questions on a black and white screen, and make sure that you're able to deliver the right transcription and translation and questioning experience, and then have people give you the right data. All the other ways of doing things are just confusing the matter. Yes, we can get better nuance, and we can understand facial expressions, we can understand how long it takes for people to respond and all this stuff, but the most important thing is getting the speaking thing right. So
yes, and the data where you want it to be, and the visibility and the transparency and the privacy, and make sure that it works as it is.
Oh, we're just looking here into the future, that's all.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it's a very exciting one.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very excited about that, and I'm really grateful for all of your insights, Prof. Gemma, and for your sharing about the work that you've been doing, for Kit, for your time, and for taking on the baton from Alfred and showing us how all of this works, and
Thanks for having me.
presentation. Thank you very much. It's been really great to understand how the platform works, to understand what's been done in the background to make sure that it works properly and that everybody can use it in a safe and secure way. And also thank you everybody for attending from all around the world. I see there's a few different time zones where people logged in from, and for asking your open-ended questions, for telling us all of the things that you want to research in the future. I'll be summarizing all of that, and we'll get Geraldine to send that out to you in an email with all the links that have been outlined. And of course, we have an offer here for people who are attending at the moment. If you sign up in the next week, it's by clicking the link or clicking on the QR code with your camera. We'll give you a free consultation from Research Network and 5 complimentary AI interviews. And that's available for the first 50 people who come through. So let us know if you need a hand. We're super excited to be partnering with Listen Labs. I think they are a fantastic organization. If you've seen their social media, they are also a very fun organization to work with, and I think they have a fantastic young team. So I'm really proud to be representing the guys in Asia, and for pioneering this new way of doing things, which of course is going to be the way of the future, and it already is. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you for supporting us, Gemma and Kit, and thank you for Geraldine, Meryl and the team in helping us to make all of this come together and to have a fantastic attendance. So thank you. See you later. Cheers.
It's been a blast. Please feel free to reach out to anybody if you have any questions or thoughts. But yes, thanks so much for having me, James. I've had a great time.
Thanks.
Echoing that. Yep. Thanks, James.
Yes. Bye-bye.